So Kate, you are a director of corporate social responsibility at TIAA. For our students who are just learning about CSR for the first time, can you please share what your role and responsibilities are and your perspective on what corporate social responsibility is?
Yeah, no, thanks, Charlie. So as Charlie shared, I'm Kate Carney, and I am a director of CSR at TIAA. We're a financial services company, primarily managing the retirement accounts of universities, nonprofits, et cetera. So my role, I manage a lot of our community partnerships and nonprofit relationships in the Northeast region. So based in New York City, to manage in New York, New Jersey, and Boston, we have active volunteer councils in all of those regions where we have a large employee presence. But I work on a team of 6, and my colleagues are dispersed all around the country, also managing their community engagement and nonprofit partnership work. Again, where our employees are primarily located, but we also work together on a broad set of enterprise-wide CSR work. So that can be anything. We just launched a sustainability action team. We do, now that we're all virtual in this COVID environment, we are launching virtual engagement, community engagement programs for our employees. We manage a whole host of philanthropic benefits for our employees. And again, some larger kind of responsible business activities. And I think it's really interesting when you say, what does corporate social responsibility, and I'm going to use the word CSR for that. Oh my gosh, it means so many different things. You can ask people in this space and you'll probably get a different answer. And there's also so many different words for it, which I think can make this a little bit confusing. There's social impact, there's ESG, sustainability. And I think probably, and it's, even in the last 3 years that I've been working in this space, it's evolved. But I think at its core, and probably what it traditionally is companies donating money, in the communities where they work, live. Maybe there's a special interest or issue area that's connected to the company or to a senior leader, the CEO. It's really company, writing checks. But that, there's still, that's a part of it, but it's definitely evolved into, how do you engage your employees in the community? To now, is your company just being responsible on all facets of the company? So what does your governance structure look like? What type of light bulbs are you using, in your office buildings? What is your carbon footprint? Do you have inclusion and diversity policies that are reflective of the type of people that you want to recruit to your workforce, to responsible investing? What does your data security policy look like? And so it's just really, I think, which is exciting, is touch so many different parts of the business, which is, outside of the scope of my day-to-day job and even our team's day-to-day job. But I think really at its core now, is the company providing its goods and services in a responsible way to its people, clients, employees, and community.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So at its core, CSR is how can a company be responsible while doing its business, or be more responsible. So that's going to look different for every type of company, depending on what their business is and where they're located and what their customers and their other stakeholders expect. What about at TIAA? What does CSR mean at TIAA, and what is TIAA's CSR program?
Yeah. So again, it can look very different at all companies, and depending on what your definition of CSR is. For our team, we really and traditionally have been responsible for executing our community engagement work. So there's various different pillars in this, but that's really what our team is focused on. And so, as I shared, we manage nonprofit relationships, primarily where our employees are located, and that's Charlotte, New York, Jacksonville, Chicago, Dallas, Denver. And we focus on 4 different issue areas. So hunger, education, environment, and community building, which is really affordable housing and a lot of the work that we do with Habitat for Humanity. And so we find nonprofits in kind of our key locations. and that are doing really impactful work in those issue areas. We do support them financially to a certain extent, but we also find ways that we can engage our employees. So that, for example, we have a partnership with a local food bank, and we agree to take on every Monday shift. And that's just TIAA associates. The food bank doesn't have to worry about where they're going to get volunteers. Our employees then get engaged in this organization, from their engagement with the company, but then they can get involved in their own way and hopefully become more active and engaged in the community, and even maybe potentially volunteer in their own time, bring their family, or become donors. And so that's kind of one facet of our program. And again, it can look different at various different companies. We also, as I said, we manage our philanthropic benefits. So as a TIAA employee, we will match up to $2,500 to any nonprofit that you donate to. Wow. Which is a great benefit. We also, if you volunteer on your own time, that could be board service. That could be going in on a Saturday with your family to that food bank, because you got so passionate and engaged about that organization. We will give a $10 grant for every hour that you serve on your own time, starting at $50. So again, just by volunteering and being active, we are supporting that through grant dollars to a nonprofit. We also have a program where if you participate in an organized wellness event, so a 5K, an organized bike ride, a walk, we will donate $100 to a nonprofit of your choice, just for participating in that. And our team also runs those programs, making sure that our employees know about them, are taking advantage of them, et cetera. So again, just different kind of components of what our team does. And I think also as our CSR has evolved, we are starting to become also kind of the quarterback of all these responsible business activities. So we produce our responsible business report that collects that information. I helped produce our one in 2018, and we're just about to undertake the process to produce one in 2021. And so really collecting those stories from all facets of the business to show that we are doing our business responsibly as a company.
It's really cool. I love how TIAA's model sounds like it really amplifies what your employees are trying to do, like in their own lives, by enabling them to volunteer, by sponsoring them to do those runs and walks, by matching their donations. So sounds like it would really create a culture of giving back at the company. Yeah, mm-hmm. And I also don't want to overlook that TIAA is a supporter of our graduate certificate program and has provided fellowships to a number of our students to be able to study nonprofit management leadership. So it's just, I think, another way that you're able to leverage your resources to help the nonprofit sector build capacity and help people get a better education and learn how to lead. So it's kind of starting to learn more about your model, and I see how it's really sounds like it's built around empowering people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cool. So what positive social impacts do you believe that corporations can achieve that can't be done by government or by nonprofits? Like, why does CSR even need to exist?
Yeah, good question. And I think I've been very fortunate and lucky to have some experience in all three sectors in quote unquote the social impact space. And so really been able to see kind of the pros and cons and shortcomings and benefits of each of these. So, public sector, there's a lot of power in the government. They set the rules. A company, nonprofit can't do that, but there's a lot of special interests, in the public sector in deciding, where funds should be spent, what laws should be passed, and as you know, a lot of gridlock and complications in that. Nonprofits, they are uniquely designed to really focus on a specific issue area, which is so important, and pulling resources to be able to really focus on, ending child hunger, for example. But as you know, and all of us, study nonprofit management, there's limited resources. Sometimes they aren't run as effectively, and there are just challenges also in being able to accomplish their mission on their own. And so then you come in private sector, and where do they play in this space? And I think the strongest is when they can all come together, because private sector, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a nonprofit and it's not a public entity. And so they are designed to provide a greater service. And ultimately, that is what they're trying to do. But when, impacting a social issue can help align with how they do business. And there are a lot of influences from that, whether it's having a happy, positive, engaged employee base, or a certain issue helps them do business, in an area better. And again, no fault at kind of the underlying motivations. And they also have a lot more resources towards it. So I think one of the best examples is JP Morgan. They put in $40 million into Detroit because they, that was something that they decided was good use of their money, and they didn't have to go through, the local government and how to approve that type of budget. They get to choose where they want to spend it, and align to probably some internal goals. But, that's a huge amount of resources that are going into a community that otherwise wouldn't have been there just through those other two sectors. I think, though, even uniquely, especially now in this time, inclusion and diversity, it's tied closely to CSR. Some group it together. Our team actually sits under our inclusion and diversity team. And I think it is really powerful when messages are coming from your employer, that might have traditionally been coming from the nonprofit space, the political space, and there are several labels and associations and identities that I think can get tied in those two sectors. But for example, we launched a Be the Change program, which is an internal program to help get employees to engage on issues related to racial equity, having these conversations at work, at home, how do you have conversations with your kids, et cetera. And one of these programs that we have, it's an employee full company book club that is being led by our CEO. And so the whole company is encouraged to read Great Small Things by Jodi Picoult. I encourage you all to read it. It's a great book. And so when your company is saying that these values are important to us, these conversations are important to us, your CEO is leading this, that is a very different message than if you're getting this from, social media, your family, the news, wherever you get your influences from. And so I think having kind of quote unquote an apolitical sector or source playing in the social impact space is just hugely, I think, refreshing and needed. And you really need all three to drive change.
Yeah, certainly. Well, from what you're saying, it sounds like working in CSR can seem like the best of both worlds. You have access to private sector resources, like you mentioned, JP Morgan's investments in Detroit, and you have a focus on driving social impact. Well, what are some of the challenges of working in CSR? It can't be all good, or maybe it is.
Yeah, it's perfect. Every day is sunshine and rainbows, and love my job, which I do. But no, it's definitely has its challenges, and I think unique skill sets that can really help you do your job better and more effectively. One, I'm working for a company that is 17,000 people, and we're a Fortune 100 company. And so if you're working in CSR at a large company, it is like you need to know the different functions of the company. One, how the company works, but do you have contacts in marketing? Do you have contacts in compliance? Do you have contacts with our business resource groups? Do you have contacts with senior leaders? And there's so many senior leaders because we're a large company. And so one, there's a lot of talk, and I'm sure that folks in this call of networking and external networking and building that. But once you get into a company, how strong is your internal networking? And so making sure that you have built relationships with the right people that can help you do your work more effectively. And that takes a lot of time to try to figure out and build those relationships. So I think that one is definitely a challenge. Two, there's also a fight for internal resources. There's a lot of different programs, great programs that our company runs, but we're always having to make the case for why should we invest in CSR versus, maybe putting money towards, talent acquisition program, which is also doing very noble, important work for the company. And so you're always having to make that internal case, as to why this should be resourced. And our company supports this work. And I think you'll get that at a lot of companies of, yes, CSR is important, but when you really kind of dig into it, why do we need this amount versus this amount? Or why do we need to do an extra program, et cetera. So I think always making the internal case is really important. And again, with 17,000 people, we have a whole team that is just focused on communicating to 17,000 people. And there's a lot of, again, internal activities that are going on. And so how do you have to be creative with your company's resources, your internal network, stakeholders to get your message across? Did you know that you have all of these philanthropic benefits? How do you tell that story? Well, that's our team's responsible for telling that story. We did over, I think, 700 or 800 service events last year. We're a team of 6. We didn't do those ourselves. So we had to, recruit people to engage in this outside of their job. We have an incredible volunteer council that does that. But using them to promote, our activities, our work, getting people engaged, it's a constant, not battle, but it's something that you constantly have to be working on to build the effectiveness of your program.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, those are all my questions for you about CSR. But if any of our other 30 attendees have questions and want to dig in any deeper, we'll have about 30 minutes once this interview concludes so you can learn more about Kate's perspective on CSR and CSR at TIAA. But I want to shift now and use the last 10 minutes or so of our interview to try to gain some insights from you about leadership and career advice. First up, I know that CSR jobs are coveted and are difficult to get. And from the School of Public Policy and the Do Good Institute in the last few years, we have recent graduates like you working at TIAA, another recent graduate working in CSR at Citibank, and then another one working in CSR at Marriott International. But curious, because I imagine many of our attendees would love to have a job like yours. What advice do you have for someone who wants to work in the CSR department of a corporation? How does somebody get a job like that?
Yes, great question. And there's no, I don't think, direct path, which is good. And I think probably can be frustrating for the folks trying to break it. I think a lot of it is putting yourself in a place where you're in the right place at the right time. And that's a lot of, building your network, who you know, knowing the players in this space also is really important. There are companies, obviously, that have CSR departments, but there are now, whole industry that is supporting CSR. So there are associations and groups of companies, forging responsible business activities. So the UN Global Compact is one. Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose, ECP, they provide support for companies. So I think, just kind of recognizing this whole industry in itself. Some folks come from the nonprofit space. They might have managed corporate partnerships from a large or medium-sized nonprofit, and they build up a network that way and have the skill sets. On that side, some come internally. I mean, being able to know the business is really important, and being able to make the business, case for why your community work is helping the overall company. And so I remember hearing one woman speak at a CSR panel, and she managed a product for the business. She came from marketing and then was able to, internally network her way into the CSR team, but understanding how that product worked, she said, was hugely valuable. And also the people that she was able to meet in the company to be able to do our CSR job. I think also when people ask me the question of, how do you get into CSR, I think also understanding that there's so many different ways to do quote unquote CSR, and they require different expertise, different skill sets. There is volunteer engagement and coordination and building relationships with nonprofits, which I shared as some of my job. That requires a different skill set than managing a grant portfolio and, reviewing RFPs. Some companies have full foundations, and, that is somebody's main full-time job of reading, monitoring, and evaluation reports, et cetera. There's a whole sustainability space, having the expertise to help manage, find out what your carbon footprint is and strategies on how to reduce that. That's very different than what my day-to-day job is. Then there's a whole responsible investing, side, which requires, a strong finance background and understanding that space. And then inclusion and diversity, the whole kind of space in that. And so I think figuring out how you want to play in this space and what skill sets you want to, or, area of expertise, I think it's helpful. And I think even, there's CSR, but I think because it's gotten so broad, there are jobs now that don't have to have a CSR title to be able to do quote unquote CSR work. And I think one space that I think is really exciting is the B Corp movement. So these are private companies or for-profit companies that I'm sure many of you are familiar with that have to commit through their legal documents that they are committed to a larger purpose than just profits. And so maybe you really believe that this company is driving impact, but your job is an operations manager or it is social media strategist. But at the end of the day, you are really helping to pursue a really, great company with a great mission in a way that isn't, engaging with nonprofits in the community. So I think figuring out, and you can do this through talking with people and research, is kind of what area you want to play in, what interests you most, and recognizing that these jobs and finding purpose and driving positive impact in the private sector can come in so many different shapes and sizes, which I think is encouraging, but also harder because you can't just type in CSR, which sometimes will come up as customer service representative, in search engines and have the list of jobs that you might be interested in applying for.
Yeah, so there's not one single pathway, but it sounds like there's a lot of options, whether it's, working at a for-profit company or a B corporation, or within what you said, the emerging industry that's supporting the CSR space. So it sounds like follow your passions, find your way in, and it sounds like networking is really important too, like externally and internal. All right, so I read that you began your career on Capitol Hill, and you mentioned this, you've worked in all the sectors. You've also done some work in Haiti, as well as with the Grameen Foundation in India. And after earning your Master's of Public Policy here at University of Maryland, you joined the CSR team at TIAA. And so it appears that you've built your career around an eclectic set of experiences up to this point. What have been some of the experiences that you've had and decisions that you've made that have helped shape your career to where it is today?
Yeah, no, great question. And yeah, when you put it that way, I have had an eclectic, set of experiences. And I think like the common thread is, and not to sound cliche, but it's truly, wanting to be proud of the impact that I'm making, positive impact that I'm making in my work and in my job. And there's so many different ways to do that. And I think, just starting, I working on Capitol Hill, being in public office and public service at its core, I think is one of the coolest jobs you could do, because you're here to solve problems for your country, for your constituents, make the best decisions really for your community. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that gets piled on top of that, and it's not that easy, as we all know. But I think at its core, that is so meaningful and so can be really, really rewarding work. But, when I was in that space, I got really interested in access to education for women and girls. And there was an opportunity where I could move to Haiti. I was doing really well in my job, got promoted twice, and, continued to think that I would continue to grow in that space. But I felt like I knew that this opportunity was in front of me. And if I didn't take it now, then I would kind of have to push that aside and say, this isn't a priority for me because I had the opportunity and I didn't take it. And I think when evaluating different opportunities, it was one, am I going to be, you have to be financially, be able to meet your basic needs, which is important. And this job was able to do that. I wasn't going to build up a big nest egg, but I was able to make that piece work. And it was being able to do something that I was passionate and interested in doing. And I had the support of my boyfriend, who's now my husband, my family members, to be able to make that happen. And just felt like, if I don't do this now, it's not going to happen. And so I decided to go for it, and didn't look back. And then I knew that I was going to be applying for graduate school during that time. And so decided to come to University of Maryland, and really, really excited and proud of that decision. And part of the reason that I did that is knew that it was a quality program, and I wasn't going to have to go into a lot of debt, and wouldn't have to be tied to a job or a position that I had to take after graduation. Because of that, I really wanted to have the freedom to be able to do what I wanted to do. And then when I was luckily found this internship at TIAA and CSR in between my first and second years, did that internship, and I saw an opportunity that this team could use some additional help. We're going on our 100-year anniversary. There was a lot of activity and additional programming. And so I asked, I said, can I stay on for part-time, hourly, while I finish my degree? And they said yes. And then there was a job that was available for me. Essentially, they were able to get an additional headcount, and the job was mine if I wanted it, to manage our Northeast relationships. So I think a lot of it is you have to be able to know what you want to get out of an experience, and identify an opportunities that are in front of you, and the right opportunities. Because I've also learned, I think, as you progress more and more in your career, there's going to be a lot more opportunities that come your way, which can seem exciting, but it's really being able to evaluate them, and are they going to meet your requirements at that time of your life, and if you're going to be able to do the things that you want to do. And you can't have it all. You can't have, big paycheck, social impact, 9-to-5 job. You got to piece it together. And when you really think about them and are able to identify and evaluate those opportunities, I think it's hard to have regrets. And I have zero regrets in all of those experiences, because I feel like I've stayed true to myself and have been able to pick the opportunities that feel right to me at that right time.
Wow, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. So my last question, because you might have been on the other side of this event just a few years ago when you were a student attending, listening to somebody from the field. So thinking back to when you were a student, what were some of the most valuable things you did for your career while you were in graduate school at UMD?
Yeah, no, great question. And again, would not be where I am today, because I think the obvious one is I was able to get the CSR internship as a result of me being a student at UMD. And so that has obviously led to great benefits. But I think apart from that, one, being able to go to India through the graduate school program, and I know things might be a little different this year. That was a huge opportunity, and just really great, valuable learning experience. It's something that it was a school project, but I listed on my resume and I listed on my LinkedIn as an actual work experience, because I was able to work on a team and really, work with a real, nonprofit client, help them solve a problem from start to finish. And we own that whole process. And to be able to have that was just really valuable. Nonetheless, get to go to India and meet just really incredible people. I see Alex Counts is on this call, and my graduate assistantships and being able to have really positive, great learning experiences in those, I think has been also huge. I was a TA for the former Governor Martin O'Malley, and so have been able to build a relationship with him. And to be able to have the experience of working with, a former, public official, and the skill sets that are required to be able to support someone in that role. And as I said, Alex Counts, I was able to help build his class with him and build just a really great relationship with him. He was invited to my wedding. Him and his wife were invited to my wedding because of that. And just to be able to learn from him and his teaching style, his past leadership experiences. He's somebody who I've been able to, continue to learn from and be mentored by as I kind of progress through my career. I wouldn't have that opportunity or those relationships without being at UMD. So the coursework is important. You can definitely learn a lot from that. But truly, I think being able to embrace all of the opportunities for relationships of the professors, the UMD community, your classmates and colleagues, those are the people that are going to be with you. And you have to be proactive about it, but are going to open up doors for you and be with you, after Maryland time is over.
Cool. Thanks for that advice. And of course, you're referencing Professor Alex Counts, the founder of the Grameen Foundation, who's also on our team of faculty in the Do Good Institute. Well, thanks so much, Kate, for the interview.